Proverbs 11. We've been going through book of Proverbs, and the last several weeks we've taken chunks of the chapters and taken principles out of individual verses. And as I've said before, there are some times where I'll pick out a verse. There'll be a particular verse that we come to, and we will spend a whole message on that particular verse, or actually more likely that particular subject, not just that particular verse. And that's what we find tonight in Proverbs chapter 11. And look at verse 13 with me, please. Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 13, it says, "A talebearer revealeth secrets, but he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth the matter." A talebearer revealeth secrets, but he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth the matter. And the message tonight is why gossiping is sin. Why gossiping is sin. Let's pray. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, thank you for the time we can look into your word tonight. Thank you for each one who's here. And Lord, we just pray that you would bless in a special way, Lord, that we would, as we're here to meet with you and together as a group, Lord, and we thank you for this opportunity we have. And so, Lord, I pray that you'd speak to each heart through the preaching of your word. May we have open hearts, open minds, that we would, if there's anything that needs to be touched on in our own lives, that we would take that to heart, but also be careful about what we see in the world around us and the people around us. And so, Lord, help us to take these things and please use them for your glory and honor. In Jesus' name, amen. Why gossiping is sin. Now, I printed out this message. I realized I'm missing part of my message here. It's not a major part of the message. I had added some things to my notes just before coming over here, but I had it's on the cloud, so I came over here to this computer and I printed it out, not realizing it hadn't updated. So I'm missing actually part of my message, which the only thing that's missing is I was going to give you some examples of how gossip or talebearing it permeates our society, particularly through the news media. And I was going to give you some examples of that, and maybe I will here if I can bring it up in a very quick and efficient, easy fashion. But first, let me give you a definition here. What we're talking about with talebearing or with gossip. Gossip is, there's a noun and a verb usage of gossip, and a gossip is one who runs from house to house tattling and telling news. And I found it interesting that telling news was, part of the definition. Now, not all news telling is gossip or talebearing. It also means an idle tattler. And then the verb form of it means to run about and tattle, to tell idle tales. Gossip, talebearing. So another word, there's a few words that go along with this word gossip, which we have the Bible word here, talebearer. We also have the word there's some of the words that are associated with it, such as backbiting, slander, and being a busybody. All those things really tie into this subject of gossip and talebearing. And so let me just give you some examples here. That one didn't update either, so I don't know why. It's letting me down. The cloud is letting me down. All right, well, somehow it didn't get saved to the cloud, so we'll see. But anyway, there's some examples. I mean, all you need to do, this is all I did. I just this evening, before coming here, I just typed in a couple of different news websites. And I just looked at the headlines. And there were a few that stuck out to me. That's really gossip. That's not reporting the news, that's gossip. And how do you know the difference? What's the difference between reporting news, just simply reporting news, and what is gossip? Gossip is something that is of very little use. There is no profit in reporting that to another person. That's one aspect of it. It's also gossip when, in the sense of slander, when it's telling news about someone else with a design to make them look bad. So gossip always has a negative connotation with it, that it's just basically speaking things that should not be said, that have no place of being repeated. And in this case, in verse 13, it says, a talebearer revealeth secrets. So this is someone who is just running around and telling tales, telling stories, telling these things that are secret. And if they're secret, there's a reason they're secret. They're meant to be secret. But there are, I was reading an article about gossip, and there's the author of the article gave 4 examples of when something is not gossip. And there's probably more examples than that, but these are 4 that he had given. First of all, speaking truth to proper parties for a godly purpose is not gossip. Speaking truth to proper parties for a godly purpose is not gossip. So in other words, if there's a secret, one of the things that was in the news at this building, where there's a building in Springfield that has a less than godly establishment in it, was just busted. They found, I don't know how many pounds of marijuana, I forget what it was, but a lot of pounds of marijuana in there, and they were having this almost like a marijuana trade show, basically, an illegal marijuana trade show in this building. And somehow the police found out about it, and they did a raid, and people fled, and they collected this marijuana. And so whoever reported that, or however they found out about it, if someone did report it, maybe they found out about it just through their own investigation, but in a case where crimes are being committed and something is reported to the authorities for the purpose of, somebody needs to step in and deal with this crime that's being committed, that's not gossip. That is reporting something, speaking truth to a proper party for a godly purpose. And the proper party, when there's a crime being committed, is speaking to the police and letting them handle it. Now, there are some people that are gossipers, busybodies. Busybody is someone who interjects themselves into other people's business. Then there's some people that they will report something not for the purpose of there's really some crime being committed, but they're reporting it, they're being so picky, and they're gossiping that they actually end up causing trouble for people. Maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's someone else. And so there is a line that can be crossed when it goes more to gossip and causing trouble, rather than, no, there's a godly purpose for why this truth needs to be reported. It can be the same in a church. If there's a situation in the church and something needs to be reported to the pastor, or maybe it's helpful for the pastor to have some information, that is not gossip. It'd be gossip if someone just ran to the pastor, hey, did you hear about so-and-so and this thing? And there's really no point to it. There's no benefit to someone running to the pastor just telling them. But there's a lot of things that it's helpful for a pastor to know. Because in dealing with different people, and it helps understand people better and know where they're coming from, which can then increase his effectiveness in the ministry. But just knowing facts, knowing news for the sake of knowing news, someone running to the pastor with everything is not as helpful. But speaking truth to proper parties for a godly purpose is not gossip. And this is what we try to teach our children about talebearing, because children are very good at talebearing. But it doesn't really change for many adults either. There's a lot of adults that are good at talebearing too, just they don't run to their parents. But we try to really discourage our children from talebearing, and we'll tell them when they're talebearing. And very often, if there's a child who is not involved in a situation, comes to us and tells us something that really is, maybe it's not something that's good that's being done, but is not of great consequence if we find out about it in a different way, then we discourage that talebearing. But then there's the time when if there is someone's safety is an issue, maybe one of the children's safety is an issue, and one of the other children coming running to us and telling us, so-and-so is doing this, and okay, all right, well, thanks for telling me, or maybe if it's an older one, they can help with the situation and they can step in, or whatever it may be. So one example would be Lydia has been good for a while at climbing up on top of, for lack of a better word, it's a bunk bed basically, but I think it has a different name. But anyway, Lydia's been good at climbing up to the top bunk. And she's not supposed to be on the top bunk. Now, at this age, she is actually able to do it more and more safely, where she actually doesn't get hurt doing it. She hasn't fallen off the bed yet, as far as I know, the top bunk. But when she first started doing it, she was still more unstable and unsteady. And so that was something we wanted to know about. Okay, is Lydia getting up on the top bunk? So when our children come tell us that they're not tale-bearing, they are telling us something that we need to know for the safety of one of the other children. And so something like that is not gossip. So speaking truth to proper parties for a godly purpose is not gossip. Once again, a lot of these things, there's just a fine line. Because there are times when people give, say it's during a prayer time, and there are prayer requests being given. And there can be honest prayer requests being given, but the honest prayer requests being given are ones that, say in a public gathering, are ones that don't need to delve into every personal detail of what's going on. In a public prayer time, it's possible to, here's the request, here's what to pray for, and there are certain details that not just every person needs to know. There might be just a few people who know more of the details, but the whole group, the whole church doesn't need to know every single personal detail about people's lives. So there can be a fine line. There can be just honest prayer requests. Here it is, it's straightforward, please pray for this. But then there's some people who, if it's about someone else, they'll give a prayer request about someone else and they'll go into the long story about all these things, and sometimes that can turn into more of a time, can more turn into gossip. Another thing that is not gossip is questioning a preacher's teaching. If someone simply questions something that was preached or taught in a message, that in of itself is not gossip. Where it is gossip is if, say, there's two people who already kind of have a bad attitude or bad opinion about a preacher or teacher, and so they'll say something and they'll go talk to each other about it as if, yep, this just reinforces our attitude and our thinking. Yep, and they have an attitude against that preacher. But just simply questioning something, you said this, why did you say this, or what's the basis for that, or how, or maybe can you elaborate on that a bit more, or something didn't make sense, or what you said didn't make sense there. Just questioning something. Oh, you said that. You said such and such. Does that mean you don't believe in the virgin birth? Then question that. Is that true or not? Or you not believe in the deity of Christ for some reason based on this particular comment? But when people just start talking about it, and maybe let's say a preacher misspeaks, that wouldn't be me. I've never misspoken. No, actually, I've misspoken a lot of times. Maybe said things in a way I wish I wouldn't have said them, or maybe said more detail or said less detail, or whatever it may be. But let's say a preacher misspeaks. And so then all of a sudden the people get together, whoa, what was this all about? Wow, I can't believe. And all of a sudden it turns into a big issue because people are gossiping about it, rather than just go question that. Somebody go question that and get clarification on it. And you can temper down the whole potential controversy. And there's a lot of things in life today, in churches and in our nation and in different towns and people's lives and families, that turn into controversies that really didn't have to turn into controversies, and it was fueled by gossip. But if it's simply it's better to question it directly to get clarification on it than to actually gossip about it. Warning of sin and error is not gossip. So in other words, if I get up and during a message, during a teaching time, and I warn about particular sin and maybe the error of maybe there's a popular teacher or preacher that it needs to be addressed, I'm not gossiping about that person, I'm just simply warning. Now if I started delving into that person's personal life and issues and turned it into slander and personal attacks, that crosses the line where it is not appropriate, not right. And then also admonishing one another is not gossip. Admonishing one another. As a matter of fact, that's something that should be done in a church body, is admonishing one another. You know, iron sharpening iron. As iron sharpeneth iron, so man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. And so there's times you have to admonish, maybe gently chide, maybe give some biblical wisdom in expressing that, and that can be a mutual thing. But admonishing one another is not gossip. But we do have gossip being one who runs from house to house, tattling and telling news, an idle tattler, and then to run about and tattle, to tell idle tales. And I was thinking about, going back to the illustration about the news media, is if you just look at the different things that are reported in the news, ask yourself the question, how much of this actually pertains to my life or my town or my state, things that have a direct connection in some way, shape, or form. One of the news articles I was going to read you the headline had to do with the vice president, the president's son-in-law and daughter not being at a certain elite D.C. dinner where the former Secretary of Defense was given a standing ovation. So, and what that was the angle, like creating the drama, because the Secretary of Defense resigned because of a disagreement with the president. And so now the vice president's not there, and the president's daughter and son-in-law aren't there. You know, they're missing. Their seats at the table were empty, but this former Secretary of Defense got a standing ovation. And that was on the front headline of one of the news sites. I'll give you a hint. It was one of the news sites that the president calls fake news. But anyway. No matter which site it is, you can find on just about any news site. You can also find, I did a search I think I typed in gossip news. And you find most of the news they call gossip is actually, it's more celebrity type news. And that permeates the media as well. Just, oh, this celebrity was out on the beach and this celebrity was out with this particular person, are those two dating, and all those things. Now that's just flat out gossip. That's not too hard to pinpoint, that's gossip. There's a lot of other things. I asked myself the question, you know, how much of this that I'm looking at really is just gossip, it's useless, needless information, it's idle tales, and then how much of it is actually valuable for life, something that is profitable. And I need to get into the points here of why is it sin. Why is it sin? Why is tale-bearing sin? Why is gossiping sin? First of all, in Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 16, God said not to do it. So the very first reason is that a sin is that God said not to do it. Leviticus 19 and verse 16, it says, "Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people." So even in the law that God gave to Moses, he said, "Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people." So talebearing or gossiping is against God's law. So that's the very first reason why it's sin. The Bible says sin is the transgression of the law. So if someone transgresses this law, well, that's sin. And so talebearing is forbidden by the Lord. Second, a talebearer can't be trusted. Back in Proverbs 11, verse 13, Now this might not be a reason why it's sin necessarily, but these are reasons why we should not gossip or be a talebearer. A talebearer can't be trusted. Back in Proverbs 11 and verse 13 it says, "A talebearer revealeth secrets, but he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth the matter." A talebearer revealeth secrets, but he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth the matter. And I hate to say, when I was growing up, I did see and hear, I heard a lot of gossip. I witnessed a lot of gossiping being done. And you know, it's a blight on a person's character when they are a gossiper, because they're a person who can't be trusted with secrets. They're a person who can't be trusted with information, because you just don't know who they're going to repeat that information to. You know, as I said before, there are certain times we got to speak the truth to proper parties for the godly purpose. There's a time when the proper parties need to know, certain people need to know certain things. So that doesn't mean we just keep everything in and never tell anybody anything, but we need to have wisdom as to, you know, is this something that needs to be repeated? Should it be repeated now? And should it be repeated to this particular person or these particular people? What would be the reason for it? Is it for a godly purpose? But a talebearer can't be trusted. And how do we know that? The talebearer revealeth secrets, but look at the rest of the verse. But he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth the matter. So someone who is of a faithful spirit knows what to keep under wraps. Now, it's not talking about, in the context here, it's not talking about specifically, hiding sin and trying to cover up sin. This is simply secrets, things that just should not be broadcast, should not be spread around. All of us have things that you would just prefer that, most other people don't know. All of us have those things, all just personal things in our own lives that we don't want to have out on display. And then maybe once in a while we might share something in confidence. We might share something maybe very personal that we just wouldn't say in a larger group. Nothing wrong with that. But we ourselves should be trustworthy enough that we do not reveal secrets, that we don't share secrets. And there's a reason, there's a reason people have secrets. There can be good secrets, things that are proper to keep secret, and there can also be bad secrets, but that's not the point of the message tonight. He that is a faithful spirit concealeth the matter. One of the other headlines had to do with that in the White House, there's just a lot of, I don't know if they use this word, but basically dread and anxiety over this whole thing, the way the shutdown went among the president's aides and things in the White House, or maybe not just the president's aides, but just people in the White House in general, really, that is a gossip piece. That is a gossip piece. When you start reporting on what the attitudes of the people are, or supposed attitudes of the people are in the White House, that is something that is just a gossip piece, but it's being reported as news. And that's how gossip gets to be accepted very much in our culture, because it's under the guise of news. Just news. Here's news you need to know. Well, who's determining whether or not I need to know this? But a talebearer can't be trusted. And number 3, why should we not gossip? Or you could say, why is gossip sin? But just to broaden it, why should we not do it, beside God saying not to do it? Number 3, the words of gossip hurt. The words of gossip hurt. Look at Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 8. Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 8, the words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. And it's repeated also in Proverbs 26 and verse 22. The words of a talebearer are as wounds. Now, who is being hurt by gossip? Who is hurt by gossip? Well, actually, there's multiple parties that are hurt by gossip. And certainly, the one who is hearing the gossip is being hurt by hearing it. They're being given information that is not helpful to them. They're being given information that maybe they wish they didn't know, that that they would, you know, that maybe now will change their viewpoint or their perspective of a person that they just wish they hadn't known. Or it's also hurting the person who is actually spreading the gossip. They're hurting themselves because they are someone who is proving themselves that they cannot be trusted with information, with secrets. But it also hurts the person who's being gossiped about because it is changing people's perspective of them. Because gossip, I'm not aware of gossip that is just meant to be so helpful and so edifying and so, you know, I want to give you a word of encouragement about this person. I just want to tell you that, you know, what Jordan did the other day, here's something he did for his family that was so great. He gave his dad and sister, right, a ride down to Holyoke. How did that go, by the way?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Was it pretty foggy that day? Pretty foggy?
It wasn't as long as I thought. It was a little foggy. And there was
Okay.
a Denny's.
And there was what?
A Denny's.
A Denny's. Did you go to Denny's?
Yeah.
Oh, great, great.
Good to see.
All right. So, you know, Jordan was looking for a place to eat for his family or for his dad and his sister, and he was giving them a ride down there, and he was willing to do what had been asked of him. And did I share that with you previously, Russ?
No.
No.
I'm just thinking about what happened.
No, I knew I hadn't shared. I knew I hadn't. You're what?
I went over to Bob's this week to check on him, see how he's doing.
Oh, you did.
Yeah, the storm door was closed, but the door was open. I could see all the way to the kitchen, dirty pot. He's hollering. Is he still in his pajamas?
Jamie's is probably true.
So is this? So,
I just left.
see, that was information I just wish I didn't know.
The only thing accurate is the pajamas problem.
The pink elephants on the pajamas? Just the pajamas.
I don't even know where
All right. Yeah.
There's some gossip right there.
So that's, I mean, this apparently is, you know, is illustration night or something. You know, you can, you know, role playing what not to do, I guess. You know, but the point is that, you know, what he said, what Russ said, which was, you know, made up, of course, had a negative connotation to it. I mean, what would my picture of Bob improve if I had that information?
It's almost believable though, because the message is there.
Now, but the point is that I didn't even spread the news about Jordan taking his family to, or taking his dad and his sister to Holyoke. I mean, he had said that on Wednesday. He asked prayer for it. He was asking prayer for a trip to Holyoke on Thursday. And so prayed for it, that he'd have a safe trip and things would go well. And, but you know, that was not something I spread around. It was just was what it was. But when people say things, you know, see what Russ illustrated. See, when he was there looking through Bob's storm door and the open door, supposedly, you know, he noticed the things that were wrong. But isn't that what gossips do?
Yeah.
The information they give, they don't have things good to say about people. They are focused on the negative connotation. By the way, that's a battle we all have to face sometimes because that's part of human nature. Why is that? Because there's really something that makes us feel better about ourselves if we find something negative to say about somebody else. So that's where the human spirit of pride comes in. And we have to be careful about those things, that not only do we not spread that, say things like that. I mean, I'm sure if Russ came over, well, he's been to our house, but, you know, somebody could find a lot of problems in our, you know, with our duplex, our apartment. You know, somebody could find a problem. Boy, you know, Pastor, he just doesn't take care of that place. Well, I don't own the place. You know, there's just, you know, you could come up with some certain things that are, why is it always negative? Why would it be negative? Why are gossips negative? They're not. People don't gossip to be positive. People don't gossip to be encouraging. People don't gossip to be edifying, building others up. They gossip because, well, they have I guess, an obsession with maybe it's a person or a particular news or a particular issue going on, and they've got to just talk about it. They've got to open up and reveal the secrets of other people. And so that is, the words of gossip hurt. One commentator, I forgot to write down who this was, but they wrote, they wound the credit and reputation of the person of whom the tale is told. They wound the person to whom it is told and destroy his love and affection to his friend. And in the issue, they wound, hurt, and ruin the talebearer himself. So there are multiple parties that are hurt by the words of a talebearer. Number 4, it violates the principle of being swift to hear and slow to speak. In James it says, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Somebody who's a gossip, somebody who's a talebearer, they have more to say than they have to listen, or when they listen, it's only so then they can go repeat it, spread it. But it violates that principle of being swift to hear and slow to speak. Proverbs 20 and verse 19 says, he that goeth about as a talebearer revealeth secrets, therefore meddle not with him that flattereth with his lips. Interesting connection between flattery and talebearer, because a flatterer, once again, what do they? They say whatever needs to be said to have their way, to fit their agenda, to, in this case, flattering to make people feel good. But what it means is that they are careless with the things they're saying. They're very loose with how they say things and what they say. There's some people, they just tell people what they want to hear. And when you have people that tell people what they want to hear, there's a good chance, here the connection in that verse, is they may very well be a gossip. So they might on one hand tell people what they want to hear, flatter them, butter them up a little bit. And then on the other hand, they'll be just as quick when they find something negative to go repeat the negative about that person or about someone else. And so be careful about that. It violates the principle of being swift to hear and slow to speak. Let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath in James. And then number 5, gossip causes strife. Gossip causes strife. Proverbs 26 and verse 20. Proverbs 26 and verse 20 says, where no wood is, there the fire goeth out, so where there is no talebearer, the strife ceaseth. Wow. So wherever there is strife, maybe look for, is there a talebearer in the midst? If there's strife among family, if there's strife among a group, a strife in a church, or is there gossip in the midst? Now the Bible does say that only by pride cometh contention. And so when there's contention and there's strife, guaranteed there's some element of pride somewhere. But along with that, you find out, is there, maybe ask a question, is there a talebearer in the midst? Is there a gossiper in the midst? Then there are certain things that just simply aren't true that are gossiped about. You know, Russ probably received it from someone else, and I received it from Russ and someone else, 2 separate people. You know, you get these things. It's like, you know, even when the technology changes, the habits using the technology don't. This is like that old, you know, the old chain emails that used to go around. You don't get those anymore because you can just do it on social media, just pass these things around. And so this thing comes up about, you know, like I said, it got sent by 2 different people. And so I responded back to Russ because I'd gotten it before. And I actually looked it up this time. The first time I didn't really pay much attention to it. Partially, well, in some way, I just usually don't pay attention to those things. So this was something that apparently started, it did start as a, I don't know, it might have even been before the days of email that this started. But then it kind of morphed into email, and then it morphed into social media, where, you know what, there's this wicked, blasphemous movie coming out, and blah, blah, blah. And you need to share this, you need to pass this along. I mean, this is just absolutely horrible. Now, one of the things that stuck out to me in that was, it did not tell you to contact, didn't tell you who the movie producers were. It didn't tell you who to contact to actually do something about it. It just said, just pass this on, share this with all your friends. And that's what a lot of those things do. They don't really give you an actual, apparently what I've heard was in the early iterations of that rumor, years and years ago, apparently there were people contacting a government official in Illinois or something like that, telling this, Attorney General, you need to investigate this or whatever it is. And so there were actually people sending letters to a government official, but it wasn't even true. It was really a hoax. It was a scam. But all it said was just pass this along. And actually another clue in that was it said email a couple of times. So it originated it originated years ago.
I just uninstalled.
So using so people pass these things around, and I for one, I don't care what it is. If someone tells me to share it, I don't share it. That is actually one thing I do consistently. If there's a message that comes through and it tells you at the end to share it, automatically I'm not sharing it. I even thought of putting a post on Facebook saying, I am tired of posts telling me, pressuring me to share things. And then in parentheses, if you agree, share this. I thought of doing that one. I didn't do it. But part of the reason I didn't do it, because it wouldn't be profit to the hearers mostly. So that's why I didn't do it. I still thought it would be really humorous if I did. Yeah. So, but gossip causes strife. And what happens is then when that type of thing gets passed along, you know what happens? There's strife because all of a sudden you get all worked up about it. You get all worked up about it, and the thing wasn't true. Now, there were some elements that it was based on that were based in fact, like a couple of tiny tidbits, but the overarching point of it, that there was this movie being released, was completely fabricated. And it was false years and years ago as well. But that's passing things around, and it can cause strife. But people can get into strife, cause strife the other ways as well. Gossip causes strife. So if there's strife, look for, is there gossip somewhere, either in my life or maybe somebody else's life? But be careful about gossip in our own life, about what we share, about what we say to others, about news that we pass along, because is it helpful? Is there a good solution? Is there a solution? Okay, if there's news that needs to be reported, if there's a certain issue that needs to be talked about, is there an actual solution to this, or are we just talking about it for the sake of talking about it? And it's really going to cause strife rather than actually being a solution. Really quickly tonight, I spent more time on that section of the message than I intended to, but I want to give you an example of talebearing, just one example of talebearing in the Bible. Turn back to 1 Samuel chapter 21. 1 Samuel chapter 21. And by the way, by me using Russ as an example that he passed along, by no means am I, gossiping about Russ to, slandering Russ by that. And I don't think he takes it that way. That's an example, a real life example. It doesn't make me think any less of Russ by that. It didn't make me think any less of the first person who passed it along to me. But 1 Samuel chapter 21. 1 Samuel chapter 21. And actually, I did respond to Russ. I responded to the other person saying, that is a hoax. Because I looked it up and I said, that is a hoax. So what was the solution? The solution was to respond and just say, you know what, that's a hoax. I don't pass those things along. And, that's the solution. Doesn't need to turn into a whole big issue. Doesn't need to turn into a great controversy. It's just, here's the solution. It's a hoax. 1 Samuel chapter 21 and verse 1, it says, Then came David to Nob. This is when David is running from Saul. Then came David to Nob to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? And David said unto Ahimelech the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee. and what I have commanded thee. Now, here is a situation where David is specifically telling Ahimelech, don't tell anybody this. This is a secret I want you to keep. And have appointed my servant to such and such a place. Now therefore, what is under thine hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in mine hand, or what there is present. And the priest answered David and said, there is no common bread under mine hand, but there is hallowed bread, if the young men have kept themselves at least from women. And David answered the priest and said unto him, on a truth, women have been kept from us about these 3 days since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in a manner common, yea, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So the priest gave him hallowed bread, for there was no bread there but the showbread that was taken from before the Lord to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg, an Edomite, the chiefest of the herdmen that belonged to Saul. And then in verses 8 and 9, that's when Ahimelech gives David Goliath's sword. And so David's wondering, is there a sword, something I can defend myself with, weapons? And he says, well, here's the sword of Goliath. And so he takes that. And then in chapter 22, look at verse 6. When Saul heard that David was discovered and the men that were with him, now Saul abode in Gibeah under a tree in Ramah, having his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. Then Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, hear now, ye Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? That all of you have conspired against me, and there is none that showeth me that my son hath made a league with the son of Jesse. And there is none of you that is sorry for me, or showeth unto me that my son hath stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as at this day. And so he's inquiring about this. You're all against me. Of course, Saul was in a very bad state at this point, bad frame of mind, because Saul is all a victim mentality. Everybody's out to get me. In reality, it was his own rebellion and disobedience was why God's hand was no longer upon him. And so he, there is none of you that is sorry for me, or showeth unto me. Saul is wanting someone to report to him. Saul is wanting someone to be a talebearer. And guess what? Doeg is up to the challenge here, up to the task. In verse 9, then answered Doeg the Edomite, which was set over the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. Now here's the thing. And I was thinking, is he really gossiping? Is he really talebearing? Because, he's got his superior, the king, who's wanting a report. He's wanting someone to help him out here with some information. And so is he really talebearing? But if you look here at what he says, you find there is talebearing and there is gossip involved here, because he really gave more information than what was needed there. If Saul just wants to know where David is, and Saul just wants to know, that is there anybody who has something to report to me? He could have said, I saw David at this place at this time, but here's what he's doing. It says, in talking about Ahimelech, and he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him victuals, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Then the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests that were in Nob, and they came all of them to the king. And Saul said, hear now, thou son of Ahitub. And he answered, here I am, my lord. And Saul said unto him, why have ye conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse, in that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait, as at this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, and who is so faithful among all thy servants as David, which is the king's son-in-law, and goeth at thy bidding and is honorable in thine house? Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Be it far from me. Let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father, for thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more. And the king said, thou shalt surely die, Ahimelech, thou and all thy father's house. And various elements to this story. You know, you could really say, should David have handled it in the way that he did, putting Ahimelech in that situation? You know, he was not totally forthcoming with Ahimelech. And, you know, it's possible that, David should have been either more forthcoming, or if he couldn't trust Ahimelech, then not go to Ahimelech. But maybe more forthcoming, maybe for the protection of Ahimelech. But in the case of the gossip and the talebearing, Doeg was the one who implicated Ahimelech in this by his report to Saul when David told Ahimelech, keep these things secret, but Doeg was one who did not keep that secret. Obviously, he was working for Saul. He was on Saul's side, so there's no reason for him to keep it a secret. But anyway, Ahimelech and the other priests, other than, I believe, one of them, verse 20, and one of the sons of Ahimelech, they were all killed. They were all killed. And guess who did the deed? No one wanted to fall upon the priests of the Lord. No one wanted to kill them. Guess who did the deed? It was Doeg did the deed. He's the one who then killed them. And so we have that example that Doeg and his slander, Doeg in his reporting to Saul with a design to make Ahimelech look bad. And to Ahimelech's credit, I mean, he didn't really know what was going on. He didn't have an idea of what all that drama was between Saul and David. But yet Saul didn't care. He's just out for personal vendetta, out to settle scores. And so Ahimelech and the others lost their lives. And then in verse 20, and one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar showed David that Saul had slain the Lord's priest. And David said unto Abiathar, I knew it that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul. I knew it. I knew he'd tell Saul. He says, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of thy father's house. So David recognized, you know, he felt responsible, partially responsible at least, for the death, that he had a hand in it because of going there that day. Abide thou with me, fear not, for he that seeketh my life seeketh thy life, but with me thou shalt be in safeguard. Now maybe there's some other Bible illustrations of talebearing and gossip that maybe come to your mind of those that talebearing, but that was the first one. And I'll tell you, we were sitting at the dinner table the other night, and I said out loud to the whole family, I said, what are some Bible examples of talebearing? And my wife said, Doeg. I said, you stole my thunder for the message on Sunday night. No, I guess we were thinking alike. That was the first thing that came to my mind, and that was the first thing that came to my wife's mind. And it's nice when we think the same things. And but that's what came to mind. I couldn't really think of other examples just of flat-out talebearing and gossip. I'm sure that they're in the Scripture, but this was the one I wanted to focus on and bring up tonight. Judas was a tale. That's true. That is true. That's definitely a good example of a talebearer. He went to the priest there, and he's, I'll tell you about this man, and I'll give you reports about him. And so definitely talebearing involved there. And so I'm sure there's other examples, but with Doeg here, he told Saul. Now, the reason I was kind of questioning is this talebearing is Doeg didn't immediately run to Saul to tell him. That would have been a clear example of talebearing. But the way that he went about it, the fact that he focused more on Ahimelech. He saw David, but he saw Ahimelech, and he gives us examples of what Ahimelech did. That, to me, was talebearing. It was gossip to King Saul. That it should not have been that way. And it hurt Ahimelech. And it hurt all the other priests that were killed as well. So why gossiping is sin? Well, first of all, God said not to do it. Why should we not gossip? Well, God said not to do it. A talebearer can't be trusted. We should be people who are trustworthy, that we're faithful. People can have confidence in us when they speak to us, or not just speaking to us, but have confidence and trust that, this person's not going to stab me in the back by going to someone else and bad-mouthing me. We should be able to trust each other in that. We should be trustworthy ourselves in that. Recognize that the words of gossip hurt. They hurt the one spreading the gossip, they hurt the one hearing the gossip, and they hurt the one whom the gossip is about. It violates the principle of being swift to hear and slow to speak. And also, gossip causes strife. Gossip causes strife. So let's examine our lives and be careful each and every day. Maybe we don't gossip much right now. Well, it doesn't mean you can't do it more in the future. Or maybe that's an issue now. Maybe you find yourself, I do repeat things, I say things I shouldn't. I'm a tattler, and I didn't even show you these verses tonight, but in the New Testament it talks about busybodies. It talks about a woman who's, it's good for a woman to be the wife there in the home and raising the kids and guiding the house, because the more a wife has to do and a wife and mother has to do in that regard, there's less chance and less opportunity for her to be a busybody going house to house. And that was spoken negatively about in the New Testament as well. Let's not gossip. Let's not be talebearers. Let's have wisdom. It does require wisdom of knowing what needs to be said, what should be said, and what shouldn't be said, and who it should be spoken to, and who should not be spoken to. So we do need God's wisdom and help in that on a regular basis. Let's pray.